Well, Broncos Country, you have your quarterback. Well, let me correct that. You have a quarterback. The Broncos, who famously pursued Aaron Rodgers a couple years ago, didn't get Aaron Rodgers. They couldn't get Aaron Rodgers off the Jets either, so they settled for the other guy. That's right. The Jets added Zach Wilson, the number 2 pick in the 2021 draft. To do so, they give up their 6th rounder, which is number 3 overall. They get Wilson back and the Jets' 7th rounder, which is 256. So essentially, the Broncos move down 53 spots. They will be splitting the cost of Wilson's salary per Adam Schefter. That's $2.75 million each. Wilson has no more dead cap money left because his guaranteed money's been paid. So the Broncos could move along in training camp with no penalty. They're not going to pick up his 5th-year option. Presumably, they would pay him $22 million. Not because he doesn't deserve it, but 2, the Broncos don't have $22 million to spend on quarterback right now. But I look at this, Sandy, and think it's not a bad move from a football perspective, but a better move from a football perspective would have been Justin Fields for pennies on the dollar, who everybody, no matter what you think about Justin Fields.
That was a 6th-round pick. It was the same deal.
Everybody feels that Justin Fields has more upside than Zach Wilson, right? Do you know anyone in NFL football that believes that Zach Wilson has more upside than Justin Fields?
That is so inherently foolish, egotistical.
Same trade, same deal.
It's the same deal. They could have done the same deal more or less exactly for Justin Fields. But the egomaniac in Dove Valley figures that even if things don't work out with Zach Wilson, he was already ruined by somebody else. And if he ever turned him into even a decent backup, it would be an improvement. And Zach Wilson shouldn't make it out of the mandatory minicamp in June. And I just find no point in making a deal like this when you had no interest in Justin Fields. You had no interest in Mac Jones, who also would have only cost you a 6th-round pick.
Right.
Trey Lance, no interest.
But, I mean, isn't that the danger of – we talked about picking QB4 and QB5 in the draft, as you're talking about with, say, Penix and –
Well, Zach Wilson was QB2.
Right. But only one of those first 5 selected in that 2021 draft is still with their team, Trevor Lawrence.
Right.
That's it. Already. Right. The other 4 have already moved on.
They've been moved on. I still think Fields can be salvaged.
I do, too.
I think Jones might be a backup.
I could see that.
And I don't see any career prospects for the other 2. I feel worse for Trey Lance. Zach Wilson's had plenty of starts. He's had more than 30 starts in the NFL. What's it been? 33, 34 starts. 33 starts, 12 and 21 team record in the games he has started. But against the Denver Broncos, he's 2-0, and he's 1-0 against Sean Payton. So this was a deal the Broncos had to make. What a joke. Again, spinning their wheels, and how ownership, I don't care if they're only playing 1% of his salary, how ownership okays this stuff, to me, is further evidence of their own cluelessness.
He's 24 years old. He'll turn 25 during the season.
In any way, shape, or form.
Well, I guess I will play a little devil's advocate there, because I look at it and you have a quarterback who has had NFL experience, who's had starts. I don't think he's particularly good.
He's not any good.
But he's had experience in starts, and he cost you, for quarterback terms, basically nothing. $2.7 million. I mean, he's making a third of what Jarrett Stidham is making.
Jarrett Stidham is a better quarterback than this guy. And I think people understood that only the Jets would have drafted Zach Wilson where they did. No other team with a 2nd overall pick in that draft was taking Zach Wilson. They
fell for the combine. They fell for – I mean, I can tell you when it happened, because I remember watching the reaction all around the league. Zach Wilson in the combine, throwing against nobody. rolled to his left, threw to his right, about 60 yards in the air, and hit the receiver that was down there basically returning punts, and people went gaga. That's what
the Jets went
after
gaga.
that. People ignored his college career and just went, my gosh, look what he can do.
No, 3 people went gaga. Joe Douglas, the general manager of the Jets, Robert Saleh, the head coach of the Jets, and Mike LaFleur, the offensive coordinator of the Jets, who took about 5 seconds in 2021 to sour completely on Zach Wilson and want him gone. This one you can't blame on Nathaniel Hackett.
Nope.
This one you can't blame on him. Because Hackett wasn't around when he was drafted.
And Hackett wasn't in any hurry to keep him around, clearly.
He was ruined or ruined himself far earlier than Hackett started his stint with the Jets, which by all rights probably should have ended at the end of last year. But Hackett has friends in the right places, or at least a friend in the right place. And that friend would be Aaron Rodgers. But you've had an owner, speaking of incompetent owners, in Woody Johnson, who has said alternately, now we've got Aaron Rodgers, and Zach Wilson will be able to learn from Aaron Rodgers.
Right.
Well,
that never actually happens.
Well.
But anyway.
Okay? Then Woody Johnson says after the season, well, we never had a backup quarterback. This is the same guy about whom you said, well, this is great. He'll learn under Aaron Rodgers, except Aaron Rodgers, 1, got hurt, and 2, had no interest in tutoring.
Yeah, he's not tutoring anybody.
And then Woody Johnson comes out and says, you know what? I feel bad for Zach Wilson because there were just odd circumstances. Rodgers got hurt. Our grand plans for Zach Wilson never worked out. Now, they're going to cut him before last year. They're going to cut him. And they probably should have. Because when Rodgers gets hurt, Hackett's offense apparently is Rodgers' offense.
Yes.
Right?
I think we knew that coming in, even when he coached the Broncos.
And the funny thing is, to tell you how bad the Bronco quarterbacking has been, Zach Wilson and the Jets went 2-0 against the Broncos, winning here in 2022, 16-9. That was the Breece Hall game. Remember the 62-yard touchdown run? And then almost a year later, the same month, this past year, the Jets come in and win 31-21. And you'll remember that as the Breece Hall game. 22 carries for 177 yards and a 72-yard touchdown run. Not just 62 yards, 72 yards this time. In both games, Zach Wilson had a much, much, much better quarterback rating than his counterpart. In 2022, it was Brett Rippon. In 2023, of course, it was Russell Wilson. And a typical 2023 game for Russell Wilson, where Sean Payton looks at the quarterback rating and says Russell Wilson stinks and lost us the game single-handedly. Wilson's quarterback rating, 30.2. His passer rating, 103.7. So Wilson's defenders say, wait a minute, he had a great game. Passer rating, 103.7. Payton's saying, no, he didn't. He cost us the game single-handedly. Quarterback rating, 30.2. Well, Wilson, Zach, that is, had a 78.8 passer rating at a 44.4, below average, but still far better than Wilson's quarterback rating for that particular game. And the Jets rallied to win both games, by the way. The Broncos were ahead in both games. So Sean Payton was as good at coaching a team that blew games at home all the time as Nathaniel Hackett ever was in 2022. This trade tells me there is no change in any way, shape, or form from the Bronco follies we have watched unfold over the past 8 years. No change at all. And I don't think it has any effect on what they do in the draft.
No, I don't
have no
either.
idea what they'll do in the draft. But they think they're smarter than everybody else. So I'm sure they'll have some cutesy move ready for us, maybe as early as Thursday. Maybe on the first day, maybe in the first round. Some kind of cutesy move where they'll be patting themselves on the back. Look how smart we are. We fleeced so-and-so. We got 2 draft picks out of one team for trading down, and we still got our guy who's the best quarterback in the draft.
Yeah.
And when they say that, you can be sure that you didn't get the best quarterback in the draft, because whatever you say percentages are of the last 8 years, if you go the other way in exactly the opposite direction, you'll be right, because they're always wrong.
Zach Wilson, since entering the league, out of quarterbacks with 1,000 or more dropbacks, there are 29 of them. Wilson is 29th in EPA per play. And since 2000, it's almost a quarter century now, he's 121 out of 122 quarterbacks in that. The only person he's ahead of is Blaine Gabbert. As you pointed out, Sandy, the Jets actually played better when he was on the bench. I'll still say that the move is not that big a deal, however, simply because you move back 50 spots in the late part of the draft, and you do pick up a quarterback that, who knows, maybe there's a 1% chance that Sean Payton can find something. Maybe Sean Payton's style, which is run my play as I called it, no improvisational, just do what you're told, might actually work with Wilson. I don't know. It's a low risk move. It's also, I think, a low chance of being successful. I don't think, however, for a second that it changes anything the Broncos were planning on doing. I think the Broncos may believe that it'll throw some teams off the scent and maybe think, oh, the Broncos aren't in for a quarterback in the first round.
Nobody thinks
they got Zach Wilson, but
nobody
right.
thinks
Nobody thinks
Everybody
that.
in the league thinks the Broncos are foolish because this guy was going to get cut, and they traded away 50 draft spots.
You traded away. You could have waited a month, and you would have just signed him if you wanted.
So they're saying 203 is worthless, but what, 253? Whatever
256,
the damn pick is, 256. Oh, that's worth its weight in gold.
I still think they're going after Bo Nix. I think it changes nothing. Nothing. Because remember now, you can have a third quarterback that can basically stay on your roster. They can be on your taxi squad, but they can be active every week and they don't count. So I think teams are going to start carrying 3 quarterbacks they're comfortable with. Now, what quarterback that is, I don't know. Wilson? Stidham? I have no idea. But I don't hate the move so much as I hope people understand that it's just shuffling the deck chairs on the Titanic. It's not going to change the trajectory here.
People understand one thing, that you've got one of the most
people you talk to, right?
Coaches
it landed
in the
with
history
a
of the
thud.
NFL. It did. They're laughing.
I had everybody.
The Broncos are a laughing
I didn't have a
stock.
single person reach out to me today.
Stock.
Not one. I was the only person responding to people that reached out to me saying, I don't hate the move. It's not a bad move. It's low risk. You grab a quarterback. But I don't think it's going to. I don't think it's going to make a difference for the Broncos. But I don't know anybody who liked it.
Why?
Because you're that desperate.
Why?
You're that desperate.
You're desperate for what? Incompetence? I guess that's the. Either. Well, I don't know if it's either or. I can only reach one conclusion. There is one head coach, and I imagine one coach in the NFL
who believes
he can get something out of Zach Wilson, and that is the most egotistically maniacal coach in the history of the Denver Broncos franchise of more than 60 years. A complete and total egomaniac who is running roughshod out of Dove Valley, making moves that not a single other organization in the NFL would make. Not one. Not a single team would give up a bag of footballs for Zach Wilson.
No, not at this
point. They
point.
wouldn't even pick him up if he were cut.
Probably not.
I don't think so.
I agree.
He'd have to play in some other league in some other way. Hey, maybe he could play goal for the Avalanche.
They do need they need a little help there, that's for sure. But Zach Wilson added to the Denver Broncos a pick swap 6th round for the Broncos, 7th rounder at Wilson come back from the Jets, I don't believe it alters the Broncos draft trajectory in the slightest. I still think they'll pursue a quarterback. I still think they will pursue one high. I think that adding Wilson is basically just and maybe it is the way you put it, Sandy, that Sean Payton has enough of an ego to believe, well, everyone else has done a bad job with him. Nobody believes in him.
Well, it's back to his Nathaniel Hackett. But I can fix him.
Right.
Except Aaron Rodgers, I guess.
So, and who knows? If it works, great. I mean, maybe the reputation precedes him, and we'll see. But I just don't believe for a split second that this trade is made with the idea that Zach Wilson will start a single game for the Denver Broncos. I don't believe the intention is he starts even one. I think they are literally blindly throwing a dart and hoping that somehow it comes close to the bullseye. And that's what you've backed yourself into as a franchise when you've continued to miss at the quarterback position. And the Broncos will likely throw another dart, and maybe they'll trade back from 12 and still grab Bo Nix and see if any of these three can claim the starting quarterback job. But this is where the Broncos are. The only thing I can tell you is Zach Wilson won't be wearing 2 anymore because I don't think the Broncos' existing best player, Pat Surtain's going to give it up.
12 hours ago, the Broncos had the worst quarterbacking situation in the NFL. Now, 12 hours later, at 4:18 p.m., the Broncos have the worst quarterbacking situation in the National Football League.
That's the thing to keep in mind from any of this. It didn't help. It has helped the Broncos in no discernible way. I mean, maybe down the road, maybe it does. But as of today, in their fancy new uniforms, it's not going to make a single difference with the wins or losses.